Hello, welcome, bienvenidos, um, bienvenue. Welcome to our webinar. Before we begin, we will invite our language justice invitation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mayra. I'm one of the members of the interpreter language team. So we welcome you today. This session is being interpreted simultaneously into Spanish. If you are not bilingual, you would like to listen in Spanish, you can go ahead and find the interpretation tool at the bottom side of your screen. There you will find interpretation globe. You click on it and select Spanish. I will go ahead and give these instructions in Spanish. Bienvenidos a nuestra sesión del día de hoy. Yo soy Mayra, soy parte del equipo de intérpretes y de justicia lingüística para este evento. Favor de ubicar la herramienta de interpretación en la parte inferior de su pantalla, eligiendo ahí el canal de español si desea escuchar la sesión en ese idioma. Para las personas que se conectan por medio de una tableta o de un teléfono celular, pueden encontrar ese icono en el menú de los 3 puntos. Una vez que hacen clic ahí, encontrarán el icono de globo terráqueo y podrán acceder a la herramienta. Muchísimas gracias.
And can I invite Camille to do the French interpretation instruction?
Bonjour, je m'appelle Camille, je fais partie de l'équipe d'interprétation en français et aujourd'hui je vais vous donner les instructions pour utiliser la fonction d'interprétation sur le Zoom. Sur un ordinateur, vous devez sélectionner l'option interprétation et qui est dans le menu situé en bas de votre fenêtre de Zoom. Si vous êtes sur un téléphone ou sur une tablette, veuillez sélectionner les 3 petits points du menu plus, puis sélectionnez Interprétation linguistique dans votre application Zoom. Merci et bonne session.
Thank you very much. Again, please choose your language for interpretation. We'll put reminders in the chat periodically as the session, as people join. My name is Gopal. I use he, him pronouns. I am really privileged to host today's Just Transitions webinar session. Before we begin, in the spirit of joy, I want to acknowledge and send great love to our friend and comrade and the person who brought this these webinars into being for us, Samir Doshi, who is whose family has just grown. They have added a new baby to their family, who's 1 week old today. So Samir is with us today, but will be mostly listening in and caring for families. So just if we can all send some loving energy, and also just absorb the loving energy of and remembering that we're always in this cycle of birth and rebirth as a people in a community. So just sending you love and appreciations. This is the 5th of our and last of our Just Transition seminars for this year. We'll be starting. We'll have some different activities in the coming year, but wanted to just share a little bit about the background. This is part of the Just Transitions program at CS Fund, which Samir leads. And Samir invited me to help participate in designing and developing these sessions. They are all come out of the interests, needs, desires of the praxis cohort of the grantees who also meet regularly to have their own conversations and discussions. So this is an opportunity to share some of those themes in an outward-facing way to the larger community. So we're really excited to have hosted this series. All of them, there was a question about whether they're all recorded, they'll all be posted and hosted in a way that people can have access to them. And we're continuing to think about ways that we can make these useful resources and offerings to our larger movement community. So that's a little bit about the series overall. I want to take a moment to just share some quick thoughts before I introduce our amazing, wonderful speakers for today. I have been a friend and comrade offered me a mantra for this period, which is from Omar Barghouti, which is despair is the colonization of the future. And I've been thinking about the distinction between grief and despair and the importance for all of us to hold the grief that we experience from both ecological erosion, from war and empire and the acute genocide of the Palestinian people and the attempt at total colonization of Palestine, at everything that's at the challenges we feel around rising authoritarianism around the world and at home. And that grief is real. And the trick or the challenge is to not let it lead to despair, and that the despair is the thing that paves the way for greater control and erosion of our well-being and the well-being of our communities and the well-being of the living systems upon which we interdepend. So I've been holding that with me for the last period through my work with the students at San Francisco State in the encampments and in the resistance to Zionism and the occupation of and the war in Gaza, but also in this most recent period. So I want to offer that as really my only framing for the moment today, because I know that our amazing presenters are going to really dig deep into this. So I'm going to introduce all three of our friends today, and then we'll do a couple rounds of questions, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. Please use the question and answer function from the webinar, and we'll keep track of them, and we can things that can be answered. We'll answer them in open format towards the end. First, I am really honored to welcome to our session Linda Sarsour, who is, as most of everyone probably knows, is an amazing author, activist, organizer, leader, guide for our movement. She is also a mother of three, and as a Muslim American, Palestinian American organizer and activist, has been fighting for racial and social justice, both at home and in global solidarity and in Palestine. And I can't help but share the quote, is a self-proclaimed pure New Yorker born and raised in Brooklyn. It is, I just want to name that it's just a gift to get to meet you, even if it's online. Linda followed your work. So thank you so much for joining us. I also want to introduce two dear old comrades and friends, Malkila Devish Cyril, who is the founder of Media Justice, formerly the Center for Media Justice, and has been a leader in so much critical thinking in our social movements, both here at home and globally, and through her own personal journey, which is, of course, always also a political journey, has brought into our lives critical reflections on the role of grief and healing in our movements. I've had the deep privilege of rolling in the streets with Malkia and being in principled struggle together. And it is such a wonderful gift to be back in community with you, and especially in this moment and on these on this topic. So it's just so wonderful to see Malkia. And also, I just want to name that Mac is also not feeling well today, so we're gonna hold space for that healing and invite you to participate in the way that works for you, and let us know if there's anything you need. And our third presenter is Adrienne Marie Brown, dear friend, comrade. I love when we get to just have conversations together. Adrienne, of course, is author, healer, doula, guide, who has brought to us the framework of emergent strategy, of pleasure activism, has called on us to hold each other accountable in loving ways that build our power and that honor each other. And Adrienne is just full of and exudes joy and fierceness in ways that always inspire me and help to guide me. So I'm always in love to have conversations with Adrienne. So I know those were a little bit long intros or maybe sloppy, but there is no greater gift than to publicly express your affection for people. Like that was one of my favorite things to do. So I'm going to take some facilitator privilege and do that. So thank you all so much for joining us. I think we can stop the slides and spotlight our comrades. And I'm going to start. We have our first question. I'm going to offer. We're going to do it in two parts. I'm going to ask Adrienne and Mac to sort of reflect on the first part of the question, and I'm going to come back to you, Linda, with a slightly modified version. But I'll just find my question here so I get it right. Okay. I want to invite you both, Mac and Adrienne, to just reflect on, since so much of your work in this period has been about joy and grief. And by in this period, I don't mean like the last week or the last year. I mean a recognition of the journey that we are on collectively through social and ecological transformations. So I want to just invite you to both share what those ideas mean to you, and how are you describing and defining both joy and grief. And I'll let either one of you go first because I know you'll just riff off of each other.
What you want to do, Matt?
I always defer to my sister. Go ahead.
Okay. I
That's
love you.
I love you.
And I love you, Linda. And I love you, Gopal. And I love each person who's watching. I feel joy already just being together. And it's making me a little emotional just to be like all week it's been like this, like just being together with people and being like, look at us still here, still finding our way. Joy and grief, I think are really so deeply related. You know, the more joy we allow ourselves to feel, the more love, the more connection we allow ourselves to feel, the more grief we are destined and signing up to feel, right? And to me, I love that. I heard someone say, and probably it was you, Mac, that grief is love when the familiar container or the familiar form is no longer there. Were you the one who said that to me? Or did someone else teach me that? Anyway, it's like this idea that the form will change,
And so there's this moment of, oh, my heart is broken because I'm in a breakup or a displacement, or someone has died, or something has ended that I thought was going to continue. And my love, my joy, everything I felt about that thing is now trying to find its way, and it's flowing through me. And for me, joy is a sign of freedom. Joy is the experience I have of being present as my full self and feeling belonging. Like, oh, I belong to this present moment and I can feel my aliveness. And sometimes this happens in family. Often this happens with friends. Often this happens in love. And this is what I want movement to feel like always. It's the measure that I'm looking for. It's like, we should feel like a place of joy and sanctuary that folks want to come towards and be like, oh, I can be me here. And there's room for me to be and grow. And with all the babies that are coming into the world right now, I keep thinking about the unabashed, unconditional joy and love that come every time I get to witness a birth or meet a newborn, how irresistible they are to me, and how every single person I meet is that too, is always that too. Could be newborn to me. And so I'm trying to hold that in my heart. And I want to say a word here that joy cannot override genocide. Joy cannot override harm. Joy cannot override lies. Like joy you can't paste it over anything. Like joy has to be authentic all the way down to the root system. And so I think when you meet people and you're like, you can tell like the projection of happiness versus like a deep-seated rooted joy. I don't know why that feels really important. I keep telling people this week, I'm like, you can't overcome genocide with joy. And it matters. And inside of even genocidal conditions, inside of even a mudslide that takes out a village, inside of even the most devastating heartbreaks, if the joy is authentic in you, it's still available, even in those moments. And that always astounds me, to be at a funeral laughing with people. Usually about the dead person, how shady they were, something wonderful like that. And yeah, I've been feeling a lot of both this week, like a lot of grief. Maybe one more thing I'll say, and then Mac, I promise to pass it to you. I also think there's a grief that comes from politicization. There's a way that grief is like, oh, if you were given a dream when you needed a reality, like as the dream falls away and reality comes clear, there's a grief there. But there's also an opportunity that for me feels pretty joyful of being like, we don't have to keep pretending like something that isn't is, which means we can make what is more. So I'm excited to do that with all of you. Matt.
Thank you. I know I was right to have you go first so that you could set that beautiful tone. Thank you so much. The last time Donald Trump was elected into office, a few weeks later, my wife was diagnosed with a terminal cancer. And the entirety of his administration was, for me, one of, fighting cancer, losing my wife, and then trying to navigate the immediate aftermath of that. So for me right now, the ascendancy of Trump into office, the capturing of the House and the Senate, well, we don't know about the House, but the Senate, feels like it mad impending doom, and things are already mad doomful. They already, like I thought, people say, how could it get any worse? But it certainly can, it certainly can. And so it's important for me right now in this time to really build on what I learned then, what I've learned before then. It's a cycle, right? It's a spiral. You keep learning the same lessons over and over. But I learned then, as I tried to claw for joy, as I tried to reach for some sense of connection, and why stay on the planet? That feeling, right? I realized that joy is not happiness. Those are not the same things. Joy is this combination of resilience, optimism and satisfaction. You feel me? And joy, those things, resilience, optimism, and satisfaction, all have structural roots. They require material conditions to exist. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to find resilience, optimism, and satisfaction when you're being bombed every day. It's hard to find resilience, optimism, and satisfaction when you're homeless or on the street. It's hard to find that in prison. But my uncle Kamal is in prison. He's been in prison for a long time. He was a Black Panther, wrongfully incarcerated, and in isolation, he began working on a children's book. And what that taught me was that even under the most dire conditions, even in the worst context, there is something that we can pull on, some thread and tendril of love for our children, of love for our lands, of love for the people, a vision for the future, something that can give us some of that optimism, that can hold us in some of that resilience, even when that last ingredient is missing, that satisfaction. Satisfaction requires safety. Satisfaction requires a bunch of material things that we may not have. So that's the first thing about joy. Like, joy is something we have to build. It's something that it's a process. It's not an emotion. It's an action. And it's collective. We actually don't feel joy by ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, joy is a social phenomenon. We need each other to find it, to build it, to create it. I also think that joy and grief, as Adrienne, my sister, already said, are related to each other. Look, like, I feel like the violence of late stage capitalism, the violence of white supremacy, it's both external and it's internal, right? It's both spiritual and material. And especially in imperial nations, that spiritual crisis has impacts for everybody else. You know what I'm saying? Like, that deprivation of dignity, that place where we forget to engage with the rest of the world as human beings, that is the place where that's not grief, that's the rejection of grief. Let me say a little bit more about that. So grief has traditionally been defined as like the anguish, the sorrow, right? The distress that an individual experiences, you feel me, in the direct aftermath of a significant loss. But that way of thinking about grief is too narrow, right? It doesn't work for oppressed people. It's when you think about it as an individual, short-term emotional reaction to loss, you can't really comprehend the losses that we've experienced as communities of color, as displaced people, as folks who are victims of genocide, of war. You can't really, that's not a way to describe and understand what grief is. It's bigger than that. It's generational. You know what I'm saying? When you lose your language, your land, even beyond just your life, it's so we have to understand, and we have to understand that when we just think about grief as sorrow, we miss all the other aspects, right? The anger, the joy of that transformative process, because some people are radicalized by grief, and there is joy in that, right? There's resilience built through that. We miss a whole bunch of things if we think about it simply as sorrow. And we miss something that we may not understand about the populace at large. You feel me? When we think of it only as melancholy. So we have to think of it more as the whole range of emotional, cognitive, functional, behavioral responses to loss, right? And there's no stages to that, only phases of it. You feel me? So that means it's personal. That means it's political. That means it's individual. That means it's collective. And the main thing I want to say about grief, is the last thing I'll say, is that Grief is natural.
Yes.
Grief is a natural response to loss. Suppression of grief is unnatural. So if you live in a society that is built on the suppression of grief, which America is, which Europe is to some degree, the formation of what has become Europe is. When the suppression of grief is inherent in your economic system, is inherent in your political system, the outcome is unnatural. The outcome is wildly distorted. It distorts our relationships to each other, our relationship to the land, our relationship to spirit. Grief is central to the evolution of the human spirit. Actually, what grief is a reaction to, it's a way of adapting to change. That's all it is. Okay. I'm trying to, look, we just gonna have to accept this cat as part of the process. But that's so what I want to say, and I know I'm kind of going on, let me try to conclude here.
You're doing great, Mac. You're doing great, baby.
But the idea is that, this is an evolutionary process. This is something our bodies have given us as a gift, that our bodies have given us so that we can adapt to change. I'm talking about, and we're in for massive change. We're in a period of mass loss, unlike one we've seen before. We've seen mass loss before. Let's not get it twisted. But it's the simultaneous nature of the crises, the globalized nature of the crisis. That is something new. People always want to be like, it's always been like this. No, it hasn't. Things change, There's elements of similarity, of course. There's some fundamental things that haven't shifted, but the conditions are not exactly the same. Climate emergency is not the same as it was 50 years ago. You know what I'm saying? And so, okay, I'll conclude here that the point here is that these mass losses, whether we're talking about school shootings, we're talking about hurricanes, we're talking about genocide. These experiences of loss, when a populace witnesses loss, experiences loss at that scale, and cannot stop it, what do you think it does to their belief in institutions? What do you think it does to their understanding of democracy or their belief in democracy? What do you think it does to their agency, their feeling of agency? You feel me? And what it does to us is what we just saw in this election, this US election. People either stayed home or they align themselves with power in a bid for protection. We've seen that historically.
Yeah.
This is what I believe Israel has done. This is what I believe many nations, this is what neocolonialism is all about. This isn't new phenomenon, but grief can help us understand. I'm saying that grief is a gift to us. It helps us to see that clearly. It gives us tools. And the last thing I'm gonna say here is this: grief can be reactionary or it can be radical. It all depends on on what happens to us at the point of loss. You feel me? So at the point of loss, mass loss, does anyone step in to acknowledge your humanity and engage, excuse me, in repair? If not, I can guarantee you a reactionary, a rightward move will take place. Okay? I guarantee you that it strengthens rightward trends. At the point of loss, is there any any sense of correct allocation of responsibility for the loss? Is there any sense, is there any organizing that can take place to provide agency and a path forward? If not, we're going to see reactionary trends. So our movement is more important now than ever before, because we have the opportunity now to radicalize at the point of loss, because loss is everywhere right now. And that's how we reach for a grief that can transform us, a transformative grief that can take us where we need to go, repair, reconstruction, the world we want. We fighting for the 22nd century. And I think grief is a path that leads the way.
Mac, I love you. And I love how that cat is laying upon your chest and your shoulder. It feels like that's part of what I want us to be able to practice, is being able to be grounded enough that something alive can trust us while we offer up strategies for our survival. And one thing I wanted to add, one thing that kept coming up as you were talking, is that these are practices, right? And I think we were raised, or we were grown up, maybe first introduced to joy and grief as feelings. Like, this is something you're going to feel in your life. And some people feel it and some people avoid it. But I think they're actually practices. And I feel like what I've been practicing with you and with others has been, we have to grieve as we go. We're learning how to grieve without stopping ourselves, without stopping our lives, without stopping movement, but grieving together with. And there's practice to it. Just like there's practices of being able to experience grief, there's practices of experiencing joy. And if we don't know how to experience grief and keep going and stay connected, and we don't know how to experience joy, like for real, if we aren't practicing experiencing those things, then when they come, they overwhelm our systems. And I see this past week. I've seen people, I'm like, oh, you're overwhelmed. Like, you are not prepared either for the grief you're feeling this week, or we're not prepared for the joy of our oppressors in this moment, right? Of like, oh, they're feeling some kind of celebration. I'm driving around in Durham, North Carolina, and I'm like, oh, I can see the small smiles on these people's faces, and I don't know how to interpret into my system. And, you know, for me, I'm like, I know that the story we're telling ourselves is that they hate us. And I'm like, I think there's some other story that I need to also understand, that we all need to understand. And when we think about what our movements need to be right now and what we need to be listening for, I think we need to be listening for the humanity inside and outside of the stories we've been told about ourselves and each other. And the fact that, like, grief and joy are actually flowing through all of this, even the people that we're being told are not ours or not us. And there's something post-binary that we have to develop. We have to be able to develop this practice of being like, I can handle big grief, and I can handle big joy, and I can also handle big truth. You know, both of those things are rooted in truth. And if we're not willing to be with truth, we're never going to be able to experience the fullness of what I think we're capable of changing in this time. And I hear you about building for the 22nd century. And I also think that there's so much we need to attend to right now. Like, I'm like, we have people who can barely hold their attention span for 5 seconds anymore. And how do we bring grief and joy to where they're at, and invite them from there to take deeper breaths into more? So, okay.
Thank you. Thank you both for bringing all of that. And in the spirit of practice, I want to invite Linda into this brilliant circle. You know, in terms of practice, like, organizing is a practice, and it is a practice that you have deeply, you know, that's deep in your life. And how I kind of want to invite some reflection and some open sharing, but really some reflection on what does it mean to organize in this period of persistent, percussive trauma that demands of us almost constantly a grief response. And I think this speaks to what both Adrian and Mac are saying, especially as a Palestinian, and in a period where lots of people are coming awake to Palestine in this moment through grief. So how does it situate in your organizing? And I think the same is true, of course, for Joy. So just to invite you to share and reflect a little bit on that and in your work.
Thank you so much, Gopal. And I just feel blessed and honored just to sit here and absorb and listen and love Mac and Adrian and all that they offer to our movements in the many, many difficult times that we had. And in particular, their incredible solidarity, their unconditional solidarity with the Palestinian people and with my community in ways that are beautiful and natural for who they are and how they show up for all of our people. I'm going to just ask Gopal for all of us and for the folks that are here with us today, just to give me grace because I'm also gathering my thoughts and I've been gathering my thoughts for a really long time. Perpetual grief for 400 plus days of the mass slaughter of the Palestinian people with US taxpayer dollars, in a movement that spent the last few weeks telling me about how things could be worse for Palestinians, that somehow I stop what you're doing, everybody stop, and let's go, work in the democratic process of the United States of America, because somehow that's going to be the end all for everyone. That's the solution to all of our problems. And although that is what I do for a living, I believe wholeheartedly in democracy in the sense that if our vote didn't matter, there wouldn't be people trying to take our vote away from us. But I felt a sense of loss of solidarity through that whole experience. This election was quite dehumanizing for someone like me, who is a solidarity activist, someone who has tried, in every attempt as a flawed human being to show up for people who are hurt and harmed, regardless of who they are and where they are, and felt a sense of, disalignment in an election where people didn't want to have a whole conversation. It was very black and white for people. And so, although I worked through it and at some points felt like I was betraying my own soul, I knew that I was doing it, whatever I was doing and organizing and telling people still believe, get up and go to the polls. This is still important. We are in this together. There was something about that that didn't feel authentic to me. And then I watched post the election, in particular, some of our white sisters. I mean, the tears were flowing and it was a lot of, this kind of outrage. And I'm not saying the outrage wasn't right, but I kind of in my heart felt like I'd love to have seen that type of outrage for the mass slaughter of the Palestinian people, that we are now saying that we are expecting something to happen, and we are so full of grief about it and so full of rage about it. And then there's something that is actually happening and has been happening for 400 days, at the behest of both the Democrats and Republicans, but at the behest of the most powerful people in this country, the people with the most resources, the people who hate queer people, the people who hate immigrants and migrants, the people who want to take women's rights away from us. Like it's all the same, in my opinion. If we went around the country, we would find it's all the same forces. And then we're getting back the thing that's also giving me grief in this moment as an organizer, and someone that resisted Donald Trump in his first 4 years and was a very visible resistance activist. And let's just say it was not a great 4 years of my life. And it was probably the worst 4 years of my whole entire life before, of course, this genocide. And now we're in a situation where we're making the same mistakes over again. We are basically putting our efforts on one man and forgetting that the things that we claim we understand, like the principles of nonviolence and what Dr. King and the civil rights movement told us, which is attack the forces of evil and not the people doing evil. So now we're getting into a cyclical conversation about how this man is the epitome of every evil that our communities have experienced in this country for centuries, some for decades. And we're going back to that same mindset. And that is giving me grief. It's like we learned nothing from defeating Donald Trump in 2020 and spending the last 4 years watching some of the most repressive laws being passed in state legislators all across this country. And we're going back to this whole, where's the anti-Trump resistance? It's not me. I just want to be clear here for our friends who are all grantees and organizers. Not me. Don't look for me. Because where I'm going to be, Gopal and Adrian and Mac, is I'm going to be deep in the communities. The other day on Thursday, which were 2 days post the election, I got to spend time with children who are the children of migrants in New York City. And we were having this conversation and I was telling these folks, I said, I promise you, that I will put my body on the line for you. If I have to stand in front of CBP officers, if I got to stand in front of the vans, if I got to organize people and teach people nonviolent resistance to this type of fascism that we could potentially see, that's what I'm going to do. And these little kids, like 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, many of whom speak English because they are in our public school systems now. And there was a translator, and these kids just so beautifully came to me afterwards. And I was standing talking to parents, and these kids were holding my hand. They felt the sense of safety and security that there were people that were going to be there for them. And so what I'm not interested in the next 4 years is symbolic spectacles of people raging around in the streets. We need deep organizing, deep relationship building, developing protection mechanisms that are underground. We have to understand that right now this administration has a trifecta. They also have the Supreme Court. And so what this is going to require of us is some self-reflection, and for us to go deep in our communities and not put more people in danger in the next 4 years. Today, as we are on this Zoom right now, there is a conversation in Congress and a potential vote by this afternoon, this evening, that will basically give power to a president to basically strip nonprofit organizations of their C3 statuses just because they may in fact disagree with the policies of this government. Of course, the government is going to contextualize these things in anti-terrorism laws and national security. And we already know who these people think national security threats are. They think they are migrants. They think they are Black identity extremists, which basically is Black liberation movement activists. They think they're Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians and pro-Palestinian solidarity movements. They think they're climate people who are domestic terrorists, people who support women's reproductive rights. So we already know who they mean when they put forth these types of definitions. And so I'm in the space right now where I am challenging nonprofit organizations to do things that we haven't done well in a really long time. And that's for everyone to kind of be quiet for just a little bit, right? No performing for the funders. No, let me tell the funder I made a call and I had 150,000 people on the call. No, we want to know. And what I want to know is what you are doing deeply in your communities, in the back rooms, in the basements of the mosques, in the churches, in the community centers, in the neighborhoods. Are you going to your neighbors and saying, here's my phone number, anything goes down, I'm here, just call me, just like we did. And we know we're capable of this because I watched this happen during COVID. The type of mutual aid and the type of community we created when the government failed us and failed our communities is what we need to be doing right now. And so for me, my grief never ended. And one thing I'll share with you is the way that I learn and the way that I continue to move forward and where I find joy is from the Palestinian people. These are people that are under probably one of the most horrific modern day genocides that we've ever seen, that is live streamed for the whole world to watch. This is not a quiet genocide. This is not what we think is happening. We watched these people being slaughtered. And 2 days ago, two incredible journalists, Muhammad Salame and Hannah Asfour, got married. They got married in rubble. Two journalists that have been risking their lives found it in them and said, we are in love and we are going to be married here in this genocide, because love is what trumps, and no pun intended, all that we are experiencing. It is also a natural emotion to have, and joy is something that is going to be natural and it will emerge from within the darkness. So I'm going to experience joy with my colleagues, with my friends, with my family. And I'm also going to mourn those that we lose and those that we've lost already. But I'm challenging people in this moment that we don't have to be moving around too quick. I'm not doing that. And I don't believe that if we put all our efforts, resources, money on Donald Trump, that somehow we're going to be able to solve all the issues that have been plaguing our communities. And so that's where I'm at. And I feel content in where my heart is in these days. And I just want people to know that in this moment, we need grace for each other. We need to not question each other's intentions in this moment. There are reasons why people do things. And I love what Adrian said. There's not a person in this world that I hate. And I know that people use that word quite loosely. There's a reason why people do the things that they do. And I'm not giving this type of grace to the Benjamin Netanyahus or the Joe Bidens of the world. I'm talking about my neighbors. There's a reason why my neighbor has a Trump sign outside his house, right? There's a reason why a Muslim American in Hamtramck, Michigan voted for Donald Trump. And I will not allow anyone, including within our movements, to turn me away from people that may need just a little tenderness, a little understanding, And maybe for us to say to them, you know what, we have an alternative here. It was us who failed to provide an alternative to our loved ones and our family. And so we will not, and I will not engage in blame game. And I also will end with this one thing also, and this is a conversation that's been happening on the internet that I think is blown out of proportion, but I do think that there's no smoke without fire, as my mom would say. Solidarity for me is not transactional. I don't care if every black person in the world said, "Damn all the Palestinians," and we don't care about any of these Palestinians. Who are these people? They got nothing to do with me. I will still fight for black people. I will still stand up for the Breonna Taylors and the George Floyds of the world. I will still stand up for black children all across this country because it's the right thing to do. And that is what solidarity is. Solidarity is not what will you do for me so I can do for you. Solidarity is what tells me to stand up for the most marginalized people and with the most marginalized people. So remember that. If solidarity for you is transactional, if we're going to call for the deportation of immigrants because we're mad about how an election went, we are not practicing true and deep solidarity, and our movements are going to be broken, and we're going to find ourselves in this situation over and over and over again. And I will say, enough is enough.
Yes, thank you. Uh, um, yeah, I think I'm feeling like words to the feelings that I've been having, and it's really helpful and potent to have that reflected back. Sometimes we feel part of what makes us feel alone is we don't necessarily always have the words to express what's in our hearts, and to have it expressed for us is a gift. Thank you. Thank you. I want to just share a little bit of my own reflection really quickly. I have this thing I've been doing. So I was in the West Bank and Gaza a year ago, July and August, with Grassroots International. And I in my time in Gaza, it was horrific and beautiful, always at the same time, the experience. And the idea of joy and generosity and care as resistance, the notion of existence is resistance is not a slogan, it's a strategy, was so alive all the time. And I have this odd practice, which is that maybe it's not odd, but I find myself watching and rewatching a very short video of myself doing the Debka with a bunch of young people in a restaurant that no longer exists, at least for the time being, in a place that is, so as I like, of all the things I can hold on to about that experience, I hold on to the dance, and the experience of that, because again, joy as practice, joy as resistance, joy as organizing, I think is really important, and is so deeply practiced, whether that's in Palestine or in the Congo Basin, or in Haitian resistance movements, or here in our movements domestically, and to hold on to those moments as ways of finding strength to do the right thing next. And this notion of mutual aid, of care as an expression of joy, as an expression of resistance, that it's not going to be enough for us to protest what we don't like. We're going to have to live into the world we know we all deserve. As an expression of that is just, hearing that from all of you is just really resonant for me. So I want to both, the second part of the conversation was really focused on something that you all already spoke to, which is that this idea of how do we move from a culture in which joy or grief is so deeply personalized, and even I know all of you have also spoken in the past and in your work to this notion of self-care is by its very nature collective. And for me also, like, my mantra is I only have a name because I am not alone. Like, we call it our names, but they're not our names. They exist so that we can be in the company of others. So in the spirit of that, we just like, how do we help make that transition to sort of collective approaches to and community approaches to both grief and joy and care. And then we'll also open it up. There's at least one question from the Q&A, and invite folks to add questions into the Q&A, and to also just breathe in the wisdom of our comrades here. I'll let any one of you.
Paul, can you share your mantra again?
Yeah, I only have a name because I am not alone. We are, it is essentially my argument against I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, James Boggs said, I'm only somebody if I'm somebody to another somebody, basically. I only become somebody when I'm somebody to somebody else. I think I'll jump in first. I liked how that flow went from me to Mac to Linda. So we'll see what happens this time. But I just want to say, there's a braiding or a threading, this mycelial threading that I keep feeling with people where I'm like, I think we're all noticing some similar things, and it requires a humility to notice these things, to be like, oh, how can I humble myself to learning what my community is telling me right now, and maybe saying I made a mistake, or we made some mistakes, or we thought it was going to be this, but it was that, or we thought the pace was going to be this, but it was that. And I think pace is one of the main things I want to offer into this conversation, is like, I think that we don't really understand the pace of change. And I've said, move at the pace of trust, move at the pace of love, move at the pace of community, which is not steady. It's not like one pace. It's nonlinear. It's like sometimes we're really fast, sometimes we're really slow, but there's a staggering of pace that's necessary. So in moments like this, I'm like, healing and repair has never happened for the wounds that this country was created with and on top of, and that healing has never happened. So there's just been this festering, long, slow, constant festering, and we call it identity. We call ourselves a nation. We call ourselves all these things, but really we're a wound that has never healed, and we're all trying to survive with each other. And sometimes that means, oh, are we white blood cells? Are we red blood cells? Like, what is our little role in this body, this entity, this earth thing? And I think healing is the way we find out what we are to others. Like, if I can ask others to help me heal, all of a sudden I'm like, here's what I need. As soon as I turn to my therapist or my somatic body workers, whatever, I'm like, I just need to scream. I just need to cry without anyone asking me why. I just need to look, this whole week, there's been a way that I've been looking at people's eyes. I'm really looking at their eyes and being like, if you can meet my eyes, like, we can go together. But there's a lot of people who can't meet my eyes, or when they meet them, they're trying to meet them coming down at me, and I can feel it. There's something there. So I want to say something about, I think healing is the bridge that takes us from the individual to the collective level of holding grief and holding joy. And sometimes we have to stagger it. This week, there's been times when I was holding others through their grief. And then there were times where I had to sit and be in the breathless, existential, like, the earth is not going to wait for us to figure this shit out, that level of grief, and I've been held, and then I've been able to hold. And there's something in that move of mutuality. I think we have to examine any experience of joy or collectivity that we get right now from punishment, from feeling superior, from thinking we're right, from grouping others into one assessment and writing them off, from dehumanization, from numbing, from domination. And I think right now what I see, I've been really tapping myself out of the online space, because I feel like the online space is everyone just being like, I'm just like, you know nothing, Jon Snow. We don't know right now. We have to not know anything but relationship. Like, I'm like, all I know right now is relationship. All I know is y'all 4 motherfuckers. I trust y'all. And I know that whoever you are, like, if Linda's like, I trust that one over there, I'm like, okay, great. Relationship. I trust the thread. Cool. Right. If you're happy for this person's baby, then I'm like, yes, we got another baby. Like, we got one. There's something about trusting the mycelial thread of connection and letting go of everything that is a master's tool, for real, for real. Because I think we talk about letting go of the master's tools, but then we're like, I'm just going to use like this one master's tool. But now I think we have to really be like, any time, we have to be like, how do we put it down if we can't transform it? And then I also want to speak as a North Carolinian about what I've been learning from Asheville, which feels very similar from what I've been learning from Palestine, which is the pockets of community make it smaller and smaller and more dangerous and more precarious, and things are happening that you could never expect. But even inside those small pockets, life is still moving towards life. And if you're providing life and food to people and someone else is saying, I've got a gun, get off my property, people are going to come towards the food and the life. And I think that we have to keep generating these pockets that are irresistible. Come towards it. We want you here. And maybe you have a silly flag on your yard right now, but that's the water's going to wash that away. The hurricane's going to wash it away. The fire's going to wash that away. And what's going to be left is your flesh and your bones and your desire to live. And if we are people who teach life, right? Palestinians teach life, sir. Like I watch that poem all the time because I'm like, I want to learn life. What we're here to do is love and life. So I want to learn that. And I would be remiss to not talk about loving corrections, because the latest book that I have, the offer of it, this, like, when I was working on this book, I was like, I think this book is for this time, but like now I know this book is for this time, because what happened with this election to me is what happens when we are scared to enter into conflict with the people that we love. And when we say we're not going to handle it at the dinner table, and we're not going to handle it in our family spaces, and we're not going to handle it with our friends in our community, we're going to leave them behind because they're dumb and they're stupid and like whatever. Someone is waiting to catch them when we let them go. And now these legislations, these are the things that people couldn't win at the dining room table, right? They couldn't figure out a way to connect at the dining room table and understand transness. So they're going to try to legislate us away, right? I'm like, we have to be willing to go back in and slow down and listen and be family and stay connected, be different and stay connected. Biodivergence is the way that the whole earth stays alive. And we've been trying to withhold our biodivergence from our people instead of demanding our right to exist in that space. And now I think is going to be a time when, like Palestinians, the core thing that we do is be. And like the people of Asheville, the core thing that we do is be and make people contend with our existence and how interconnected we are to each other. I think that's all I have for now.
So we going in the same.
Sure.
Okay. To be honest, I hate talking about healing, It annoys me. It's annoying. It's just been so captured by capitalism and becomes so hyper individualized, and everybody thinks you got to do that first and then you get to work after that, and or it's like ignore it altogether, and that the work comes first. Either way, so I like to think about transformation, and it's a semantic difference. It don't matter. But for me, the meaning feels different, It allows me to understand that the work is transformative and that there's a healing fire in the process of building a base, doing leadership development, building movement infrastructure. All of those things were transformative for me. Going door to door, door knocking, phone banking, those were transformative for me. Growing up in a freedom school, singing freedom songs, that was transformative for me. It's not therapy, and I love therapy. I'm in therapy, ain't knocking therapy. But I'm saying a lot of the transformative work that we need to do is in community. It's not by ourselves. And so it's particularly sorrowful for me, the fracture in solidarity that I'm witnessing right now. I'm a firm believer that solidarity is about linked fate. It ain't even because I care about you or I like you. It don't even matter. The fact is, the fact is that the phone in my pocket is killing my sister and my brother somewhere else. They are setting us up for to be unable to help each other. You understand? To make us dependent in ways that kill each other. And it's hard to resist that. I got a phone in my pocket. You feel me? Like it's hard to extract oneself from their machine. And in the ways that I can't extract myself, I try to at least be conscious. I try to at least make some intervention. This quote unquote rainbow coalition that we have been fighting for, the idea of an inclusive democracy, the idea that it takes us all, or the idea of lifting all boats, all of those ideas are currently in question right now. They're in crisis right now. And they were beginning to be in crisis before this election. But the election is not the important piece here. What's important is the shift, is the rightward shift of the nation and the world. What's happening in the United States is happening all over the world. There is a right-wing bloc that is emerging globally. And so when we talk about solidarity, it's not just between communities, also needs to be across these waters, you know what I'm saying? And across these borders. Like, let me see. I don't feel well today, so I apologize. I might be a little bit scattered. But part of the goal, right, of the right is not simply to capture the infrastructures of power. It's also to force us into despair. It's to force the population to believe there's no alternative but them, but this, but their way. It's to push us to align with their power because we believe we need their protection. It's an interesting thing, and this is probably a controversial, I don't know, with this group, but like when I think about, I'm not a historian, I'm not an academic, I don't know everything about Israel, that's just real talk. I don't, But here's what I know. That in World War II, Europe made a decision to ignore anti-Semitism. It made a decision, an anti-Semitic decision, to essentially eject its Jewish population for its own interests, position them in someone else's country, in someone else's land. It partnered with the United States to do that. What I'm saying is, as a result, we've seen a repressive, right-wing, imperial force grow there. And what I'm saying is that is not different than what is happening right here in the United States. What I'm saying is that being an oppressed group is not a immutable people, when they do not see another alternative, will align themselves with power. They will align themselves with power. They will align and become a neo-colonial oppressor. They will become a proxy. That has happened in Africa. That has happened in India. That has happened all over the world. And so the left has a job to do. It is to provide an alternative. That is our job. Our job is to demonstrate that there is an alternative, because the consequence of not offering an alternative, we are witnessing it right now. We see it. Neocolonialism is the most dangerous, threat, I think, to our future, because it confuses us into thinking, like it confuses identity and power. You feel me? And so one of the things that we have to do is, number one, as we think about healing, as we think about transformation, is we have to, number one, rearrange our thoughts about identity and power, right? We have to rearrange our thinking. We have to understand that power is power. You know what I'm saying? Identity is identity. They're not the same thing. And if we want to build power, we have to move a little bit beyond identity. We have to understand how people are aligning themselves. We have to understand their emotions. We have to understand their interests. Okay. And that requires listening. Organizing is a skill that it starts with listening. It begins with relationship. So we can't dispose of, the Latino men that voted for Trump. We can't dispose of the Black men. I had a taxi driver a few months ago who was just a wonderful Black brother talking to me about his dojo, his dog, his 3 daughters, you know what I mean? And in the midst of that, he started talking about reparations. I'm like, okay, brother, let's get into it. And he immediately went into this nativist, nationalist, anti-immigrant, reparations should be only for African Americans, and, forget the Jamaicans and forget all the Caribbeans and forget the blah, blah, Europe should deal with that. I'm like, where do you think America got his sugar from? But anyway, that's another matter. The point is that inside of what I thought was a progressive conversation, boom, nativism, nationalism. This is the fracturing of solidarity, when people no longer understand that their interests actually do align. When folks make a bid for power, when they align themselves with power in this bid for protection. That is how solidarity is fractured. You feel me? It's not just because we don't like each other or we mad or blah, blah, blah. It's because you actually don't believe that solidarity is going to get you freedom. And the left, it's our job to remind people in all the ways that that is not the case. Actually, it's the only path, and this is partially about, when I think about healing, I just want to bring it's a structural process. It's not simply, it's not simply a process of self. It is an alignment of self to the society, to the structures, and to the society. These are 3 points of transformation that we need all of them to heal. You feel me? So I'm just saying, like, we need to practice a new kind of solidarity that's beyond identity. We need to build movement infrastructure, rebuild. We need liberated zones in our communities. Our movements need to demonstrate our ability to have dual and competing power with the oppressor. We need to demonstrate to our people that, for example, we can actually deliver healthcare. We can deliver transportation. Like, they believe right now that the only way they can make it day to day is to align with the forces of the right. How can we demonstrate to our people that that is not true? That together, sometimes I'm annoyed by mutual aid. I love it, but I'm annoyed because we think about it too small. I want to think about it on a different scale. You feel me? Bring it up. Bring it up. We're talking about liberated zones. We're talking about dual and competing power, new ways of thinking about infrastructure. The last thing I'm going to say is this. We know that trust in institutions in democracy has plummeted, not just in the United States, all over the world. People like, whatever, this thing is a lie. It don't work. We have to rebuild faith and belief in, in a new kind of economic system. We don't like to talk about socialism. A lot of people all over the world have been harmed by authoritarian communists. And we know that authoritarianism can show up in any economic system. But we need a new economic system, and we need a new political system, and we need a new way forward. And it's up to us in this time of great repression, and we're gonna see that 50s style repression now. Linda, you already said it. My sister already talked about, the ways that they will identify us as domestic terrorists. They already have the categories. I looked at my mother's FBI file, 192 pages. That's the short version. And in each case, they had this place where they check off, like, what kind of enemy are you? And it's like communists, animal rights activists, KKK, like they all was in the same thing, Black nationalists, and that's the check, Black nationalists. The infrastructure is there for them, the infrastructure is there for them. So we know that we're going to face all this repression. We're going to have to heal under threat. How do you heal? How do you heal in a war? How do you heal in a genocide? How do you heal when the economic conditions are absolutely terrorizing? I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that whatever we do, it will have to be through solidarity. It will. That's what I know. I don't know nothing else, but I know that. So I'm gonna leave it at that.
Linda, I'm gonna invite you to share, and then we probably have time for one question from the audience before I close this out.
And I'll probably incorporate one of my remarks, Gopal, with one of the answers in the question about, like, what are we doing right now? I'll just say this. I know this is going to sound really weird, and maybe I just don't interpret things in the same way. I feel healed myself, even through genocide, even through all the injustice, even in the darkest of worlds. And I feel healed through so many things. I feel healed through knowing that I sleep well at night, and using every talent, every skill that I have to alleviate harm and alleviate suffering. I feel healing through being in community with incredible people who are willing to sacrifice things in their lives for the things that they believe in. I feel healed from family. I feel healed from cats, because I'm also a cat parent myself, even though my cat doesn't act as romantic as Mac's cats do, but they're still there when I need them. And so for me, there's like a solace that is in my heart, that even watching the mass slaughter of my people, watching them get up and say, there's a purpose here. There is something much bigger than me, much bigger than my children, much bigger than the rubble that we are amongst. And when I think about that, I feel a sense of privilege that as much, harm that I even witness and see, in just in my immediate vicinity is nothing compared to what others are feeling around the world. So I want people to sometimes sit in some gratitude for what we do have, and the things that we do have, and the access that we have, and the people that we have access to. Even when we think we don't have, we actually have so much more than we think we have. And I've sat many times and I wrote things down, and I said, what are the things that I have, things that I love? And the list is very long. And I just want people to do that in this moment of where people are feeling all kinds of feelings. And I will just, lastly say to my colleagues here, I have been doing a lot of thinking. I stay up really late at night about what am I going to commit, right? Because it's also about my own personal commitment here. What am I willing to do in the next 4 years, in the next 8, in the next 10, 20, whatever time I'm given on this earth. And I do believe wholeheartedly right now, it's all about going right back into our communities, right? Like right now, do you know the teachers in your local school? Who are the principals of the public schools, particularly ones where there are many migrant children who go there, right? Who are the religious leaders in your area, in your community? Who are the business owners? Who are the people that are ready to join us and commit to doing the deep level of protection that we're going to require? How do we map quietly the cities that are and towns that are not sanctuary cities, not sanctuary towns, right? How do we start reappropriating our resources to the place that need it more? And I'm going to be controversial here because we're all colleagues, and this is not like a general call, it's for the CS Fund grantees. Like, and y'all can quote me on this and put this part of the recording out. I will be very upset to see any of my colleagues or friends or philanthropy putting money, big money on these big public spectacles and taking money away from the most marginalized groups right now that need our support. This is not the time to grandstand. This is not the time for the big stages and the big concerts and the celebrities coming to do solidarity or whatever the hell shit they think they're doing. This is the moment to say, where are the most marginalized groups, the most marginalized parts of the country that are in the non-sanctuary cities and states? And when I say non-sanctuary, I don't just mean migrants, but in the states that have the most repressive um, repro laws, all the things, right? And putting the money there, because those people are going to be sacrificing more than the Linda Sarsours in New York City, more than the folks living in California, right? Or the people that live in, Illinois. We're talking about our colleagues who are going to be even in deeper, deeper danger than we are, and are going to have to really be putting everything that they can to protect our people. So that's what I'm doing. I am committing to supporting folks in non-sanctuary cities and towns. I will come, I will sit in your basement. I will train people in nonviolent civil disobedience. I will do whatever you want me to do. I'm all in. My children are grown. I have no responsibilities in my life. I am grateful for the place that I'm in at this age, and that is what we need to do right now. So whatever I can do to be of support to your organizations, to your people in ways that are safe, digital security. What does it look to have even personal safety and security? Unfortunately, we are people who've experienced this before. I've looked death right in the eye in this movement, and I have, and I when I hear Max say this, looking at her mom's old FBI file, I'm so proud for my children to look at not only my great grandchildren look at my FBI file, but also to look at my death threats and to look at the police reports and the law enforcement and all the things to see that there are real people in our communities willing to risk their lives for the things that we believe in, and we are willing to do that for our neighbors. And one time, and me and Bernie aren't on the greatest terms these days during genocide, but he did say something one time that I'm going to give my old man credit for, and I still do have a lot of love in my heart for him. He said, "Are you willing to fight for somebody that you do not know?" And that was his question to us. And I will say that that was one of the most powerful things anyone has ever asked me. And he didn't even ask it to me directly. He was asking it at a rally. And somehow it just stuck with me for ever since he said that till today. I always ask people, are you willing to fight for someone that you do not know? And I hope that everyone's answer here is yes. And I don't care what your political views are. I don't care who you voted for in this election. I don't care what you think of Muslims or not. I am willing to fight for people that I don't know, because I don't believe that anyone should live in fear or feel harmed or be harmed in any way. And so we got a lot of work to do. I just think it's quiet work. And I hope that people go back and build those deep relationships as close as possible to where you are.
I think we'll want to go back to this entire recording and make it a transcript. In part also so that we can make sure that every word is interpreted and translated for all of our listeners, all of our participants today. Is really powerful. And also just to be able to revisit the wisdom that the three of you have been sharing. We're approaching the end of our time. I just want to save a couple minutes to do some closing remarks, but I wanted to invite at least one of the questions. Some of the questions in the chat have been answered, and we'll share those out. But I wanna, there's one that I think is really important here. I think we've sort of hinted at it and you've all spoken to it a bit, but the importance of spirit and spirituality in your approaches, or how that influences your perspective, how that helps you navigate the times and the challenges. I'm sort of paraphrasing or restating the question. And we just have a couple minutes, so if there's brief reflections from y'all on that, I'd love to hear it.
I'll just speak real quick, because this is really important to me. I think for me, and I know that not everybody's a person of faith, and I love you regardless of that, but I am, and I'm a very proud person of faith. And For me, honestly, Gopal, Adrian, Mac, if I didn't have this opportunity to be a person of faith and believe in a universe beyond this one and believe in something much larger than myself, I don't think I could have survived in this movement. You know, for Muslims, a lot of people hear the kind of more basic stuff about, like, you know, we pray 5 times a day. It's not just about prayer. It's about going to a private place for 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes, depending on what time of day it is, and being able to sit with yourself, right, and be able to worship something, or to worship God more specifically in this moment, and being able to also have conversations. And I know this is like Muslims believe in this idea that there is nothing between you and God. And so sometimes when I'm feeling the deepest of hurt and harm, and I'm feeling just disappointed and frustrated, to be able to speak to something much higher than myself and say, send me a message here, like, what are we doing? And also just the commitment in my faith of standing up for the most marginalized people, and this belief that all people were created by God, regardless of who they are, even those who are not Muslim, is very important to me. And it's a deep commitment of where I move and how I move. And the other thing that I'll say about, and I don't know, and I don't speak for other faiths, but Islam is a very practical religion. There's no, we sit around and pray about it and make sure that, you know, hopefully it all goes good. We are actually told, as Muslims, to trust in God, but tie your camels, my friend. You know, your camels are going to go running around if you don't tie them. I mean, I know you trust, but you got intellect. I gave you, you know, things to use. And so for me as a Muslim, I love being part of a faith that doesn't just tell me that believe God is going to make it all great. Like, no, God was like, look, I put you here. I gave you some blessings. What are you going to do with the blessings that I gave you to protect my creation, to alleviate harm of my creation, which is everybody? And so that gets me up every day. I'm like, God is counting on me to do the work. And so faith for me has been an anchor into the way that I move and the way that I organize. So it's a 100% central to like who I am as a person and how I show up in movement.
And I'll just briefly add that faith is important to millions of people. And so, as a movement, if we don't understand that, regardless of your individual beliefs, if we don't understand that, and if we don't engage, and not only that, but as other parts of our movement infrastructure are decimated, the infrastructure of faith remains. And so we would be foolish, I think, not to engage. And the last thing is, you know, we've seen the surge of the white Christian nationalists. You know, we understand the damage that they do, but faith is also a place of narrative terrain. It's a place of narrative contest. It's a place where somebody on the other side is trying to convince you that the way it is the way it always has been and the way it always will be. That inequality is God's will. You feel me? Like, there's somebody out here trying to convince folk of that. And so it's just not intelligent to not engage, you know, with people of faith, and to not engage with faith leaders and faith infrastructure. It's intelligent for us to do that, strategic, and we have to figure that out in this next period.
I'll add as a closing piece that I also don't think that any of my work would happen at this point without a spiritual backing that is beyond words. I have been in ritual and asked my ancestors to come walk this life with me, and now they're with me all the time. And I feel like my spirit is nature and ancestral, and I'm never alone. Like, I'm never taking an action alone. I calm myself down and say, I ask a whole collective, does this need posting? Does this need saying? Does this need singing? Or does it just need me to experience it? Like, all of these are spiritual activities. I've been part of a prayer circle for Palestine that has been meeting this whole past year. We have another gathering coming up on this Sunday, and it has been really an incredible space to me because it's multicultural prayers for Palestine. So it's very focused, but it's like all coming in from all these different faith places, and it's been really helpful. I'm a long-term member of the Pandemic Joy community, although, you know, I'll be coming in and out, but I'm part of this. I know that it's there. I think about the videos I've watched out of Palestine and how, like, when I lifted my eyes from the most horrific aspect, what I heard was there is no God but God. Like, that has changed me. It's changed me. You know, I was like, oh, our people are not like that. Our people are not like that, where something is happening and what we're saying right away is, I surrender this to God. I understand that God knows this and I don't. And I'm like, oh, I need that level of spirit. And that's what I've been turning to my ancestors for. It's like, you know, the way that I can't see. So put me in the right path, put me on the right path, put me on the right path, and just let my actions be of service, of the highest possible service and the highest possible good beyond what I can comprehend. Please let this be flowing through me. Please let this channel be the right open channel. And my job is just to stay open. And I also want to say that Octavia Butler told us pray working. Pray working. Like every single thing that you are doing is part of that prayer that you're offering. You don't sit still to do it unless sit still is available to you. That's some privilege. But if sit still is not available, then you pray walking and you pray growing and you pray planting and you pray raising children and you pray taking remarkably brave actions, which we're going to have to do. So, all right. That's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the three of you, Linda, Mac, Adrian, for the gift of your time and wisdom and sharing. Thank you to everybody who joined us. I know some folks are needing to leave right on time. I want to, since this is our last session, I want to invite everyone to give just big love and appreciation to our interpretation team who has worked with us and kept pace, and our dear friend Isaac, who has been managing the tech support for all of these sessions, for Samir and the folks at CS Fund and the Praxis Group, the grantee group who brought us these brilliant topics to end, from whom the community of participants is drawn. We are going to post the videos posted on YouTube. I'm clearly looking at my careful notes here. So please look out for that, and notice will go out to everybody who's registered. It has been just such a privilege to be a part of this series, and in particular to close today with such amazing, wonderful, brilliant friends and comrades. And yeah, let's roll. It's time to keep moving together. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.